Hi everyone, my name is Shayna. This is gonna be my first ever video on BookTube. You know, with the whole book talk situation kind of just like up in the air, I was like, listen, I need a place to land if TikTok goes bye-bye. And it's not gonna be Instagram or Facebook, so I was like, your girl just gonna have to make a BookTube and invest in doing some kind of long form content type of thing. Alright, so here I am. I joined Book Talk like a year ago. That's when I really started getting back into reading a lot, and I've kind of just been doing it ever since. This past year, life was lifing a little bit, so I didn't go as ham as I wanted to in 2024 with my reading, but I am back in full-fledged 2025. My reading goal for 2025 is actually only 20 books. I didn't want to get too crazy and too overboard, too overzealous, and live in Delulu land and decide to do some crazy outlandish number. So I was like, you know what? I can commit to around 2 books per month. So 20 books is less than 2 books per month. So I figure if I can hit at least 2 books per month, 2 books per month, I won't just meet my goal. I will surpass my goal. Okay, and then I'll really feel accomplished. So with that being said, I wanted to talk to you guys about a book that I recently read, and that was The Fifth Season by NK Jemisin. A little bit about this book. Essentially, it's about a woman who has some sort of magical power, and she's on the hunt for her daughter, right? This is like kind of apocalyptic world where every season these massive world-ending events happen, like massive earthquakes, and the magic system in this book is a bit kind of like earth-bending, kind of like Avatar type of situation, but not fully. And there's some of like ice that's involved with the magic, and so it is unique. It is very unique. This is my first time reading anything by NK Jemisin, and I rated this book 3.75 stars. I didn't like it enough for it to be a 4, but I still enjoyed it enough to be a 3.75. Do I recommend this book? Maybe. And here's why. If you like sci-fi fantasy, you might enjoy this book, but there's a caveat to that. This book specifically gave very much like slow burn sci-fi fantasy. So it's not a lot of like action going on, not a lot of heavy plot moving events. I will say majority of the book I kind of had to like push myself along a little bit. Not to the point where like I wanted to DNF the book and I just forced myself to continue. It wasn't anything like that, because the whole premise of the book, and there were different aspects in the book that intrigued me enough to keep going. But it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to find out what's next. It wasn't gripping me wholly, you know what I mean? I wasn't fully gripped. I wasn't fully invested. I wouldn't say I was fully invested. So when you first start the book, right? NK Jemisin starts in a very intriguing and interesting manner, kind of just introducing you into the world and what's going on right now. Kind of a bit of like the stillness, which is kind of like the land that they're on. That's the stillness. And the people are the stills, and then there's the OG origins, which I think is how it's pronounced. There's like origins, those are the people who have magic, right? But they get sent to fulcrum, and they're only valued to the extent to which they're able to be used. Otherwise, they're hated and they're ostracized, and they have to hide their magic and within their communities. So they're not out and about. They're hidden, and then they're discovered by the guardians, who either seek them out, or the parents of the origins, seek out the guardians to come and take them to fulcrum, which is where they kind of train them and all that, right? I did get kind of like a little bored at points, and those were the points when I had to push myself forward, because I was just so intrigued by the premise of the book. And it's very much like detailed world building. It also has kind of like a multi-POV situation, which I'm not a huge fan of multi-POV, so that kind of like I had to push through a little bit, because I'm like, okay, the premise is interesting. I like the unique way that NK Jemisin is presenting the story and presenting the details, and slowly slowly showing you and teaching you the way of this apocalyptic world, of the stillness, of the origins, of the obelisks, of the stills. Like, the way she presents the world to you is very unique and very slow burn. So it's like you have to be interested in kind of that sci-fi fantasy world to have the patience to make it through that process. This book to me, majority of the book to me, felt like the first episode of a new series, the pilot episode, where it's like they're breaking everything down. So like the episode isn't completely entertaining. Usually the pilot episode isn't usually completely and wholly entertaining because they're introducing the character. They're trying to like bring you into this world and have you understand what this show is about, and more intricate, detailed way to that towards the end where things start to kind of happen. You start to realize, okay, this is why I care about this, and okay, I kind of understand what's going on now. So that's kind of how I felt about this book. Like, majority of the book was very pilot episode, kind of the way it was set up. It was set up like a pilot episode. And to me, that was enough, and I kind of had that in the back of my head as it was going on. I was like, okay, this is all about introducing the world. I mean, it took a while for me to like be fully invested, like, okay, I really do like this. I really do enjoy this. So it went from like a 3.3 in the beginning to by the end, I was like, okay, this is a 3.75. I actually enjoy the book. I actually enjoy the writing, the unique style, and I'm actually intrigued by the world and the magic system that's happening within this story and this apocalyptic seasons that's going on and this journey that the characters are going on, so I don't want to like spoil too much about the book specifically, but just know that going in, that if you don't enjoy a more slow burn, detailed narrative, you probably won't like this book, because it's not heavy on the action. It's not heavy on like plot driven events that are happening. It's really like bringing you into this world, but in a very unique way. It's not like linear. It's kind of like past and present, and you're over here in this location and you're over here in this location. It's not linear. And then she speaks to you, or the narrator speaks to you outside of the events as well throughout the novel. So it's done in a very unique way, and I would have to say that it's probably going to be more of an acquired taste. So I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. But overall, I found it to be a very solid read. I read it within 2 days, so clearly I was locked in. I was invested in some way, even from the beginning when I was getting kind of like, when it was getting a little bit dull for me. I was still invested. I was still intrigued, and I don't think I've ever read a book that was so like slow burn, kind of, which, I mean, I haven't read a lot of sci-fi fantasy books. I'm kind of still new in my reading journey, so keep that in mind. But the only book that I can kind of compare that kind of slow burn writing to is Andy Weir's, what is that book called? Oh, Andy Weir's Hail Mary. So I'm not saying these books are similar. I'm just saying like the way it's like slow burn kind of before like plot driven events kind of happen. I would say it really reminded me kind of that like similar slow burn style. The only difference is that, I mean, there's many differences, but with Hail Mary, the way that slow burn is written, I wasn't invested enough in that, and I DNF'd that book, but that's a whole other situation. This book, though, the way it was written, it captivated me just enough to, like, keep me going. Until it got to the point where I was like, okay, wait, I actually really like the way this is written, and I'm kind of enjoying this, and I kind of really want to know what's happening, and I just got more interested and more intrigued and more invested. But it did take a while. Like, you have to be, like, invested into finding out what the author is kind of, like, unraveling here. But I enjoyed it overall. 3.75. I'm already on to the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy. NK Jemisin, 5th season. I called it Fifth Element at one point. I'm like, that's a movie. Okay, that is not... But reel it in. Okay. But I would recommend it if you enjoy those type of books. So, I thought it was overall good. Let me look at I try to always write down my thoughts as I'm reading it, or like right immediately after, so that when I do a review, I remember how I felt about it and what I was thinking. So I'm gonna read a little bit of that. I use Storygraph, by the way. I don't know what you guys use, but Storygraph is the bomb to me. I love the way it breaks everything down. I've never used Goodreads. It's not really, I have it, but I've never like actively used it. I tried Fable, and I don't know, I feel like I don't fully connect with the like setup of Fable. I think it's good for like buddy reads. I do. I've never used Storygraph for buddy reads, but Storygraph, I just like the way it breaks everything down. Kind of like, you know, into like charts and stuff. It's kind of hard to see, but you know, kind of into charts and things like that. So my first journal entry while reading this book was, the story is interesting. I'd say it's taken up to 100 pages to decide if I'm invested in enough. Although the very start is compelling and pulled me in, after that I did have to push myself to continue a little bit, as it's just kind of okay, which I already kind of said to you guys. And that was at 22% into the book. This is 29%. I'm starting to feel more invested now that more plot related things are starting to be introduced into each storyline. When I say each storyline, that's like the multiple kind of POVs that's happening. There's like multiple journeys that are happening throughout the book as you're reading it, and it kind of switches back and forth. So this is 71% into the book. I guess what's throwing me is I'm still not fully grasping the plot of the story. Like, it starts off as this origin, Eason, I think Eason is the main character's name, trying to find her daughter, and then we get introduced to a completely separate POV, and not fully grasping why I care about either of their characters or their journey. I'm also not the biggest fan of multiple POVs, which I kind of already said to you guys, but the premise and the framework of the world, this is too small. And the framework of the world and the foundation of the story was enough for me to continue with some moments that kept me intrigued. Overall, though, it's kind of flatlining for me. At this point, my only desire to finish it is because I'm so far into the book. This was 71% in, mind you, 71%. That's what I'm saying, like, I was going through this kind of back and forth between the POVs and hopping between these three journeys. I was like, get slowly invested, and then it would switch into the other person's journey, and then I was like, okay, here we go again. So there's three kind of different journeys happening at the same time, and they would start with one, which was Eason, and then it would switch over to present you this storyline, and I'm getting invested in this storyline, and then it switches over to this storyline, and I'm getting invested in this storyline, and then it jumps back to this storyline. So it's like I was going like up and down between like it flatlining and like kind of like, why do I care about this other journey? It wasn't allowing me the time to kind of be invested into one, because it was like switching between three, and I usually enjoy books that tend to be more of like a main POV, like one main POV. So let me just go down to the end and tell you how I felt at the very end of this book. So it's long. Okay, actually, you know what? Let me copy all of this, because these words are very small and I can barely read them myself. Come on now. I'm gonna copy it to my notes so I can read it more clearly. All right, there we go. So this is at the very end of this book. This was like kind of like my final review of the book. A lot of times the author throws out information that you don't fully understand why it's relevant, so expect to be confused a lot by all the information being thrown at you throughout the book. But eventually it does kind of all tie together by the end. Now, don't get me wrong, you're still very much left with questions, but you understand more, and by the end I had more of appreciation for how the author unraveled the story and the way in which the details were presented. It is what you may call like a super slow burn sci-fi fantasy novel. It took me until over 100 pages to decide if I was fully invested or not, and even after that, the switching of POVs, which I told you the different journeys, would kind of pull me out of each journey being told. The overall premise of it did keep me intrigued throughout, and at around 300 pages in was when I really started to become fully locked in, and it kind of ramped up my enjoyment of the book. It's like earthbending type magic system with a few different types of species, if you will, being presented and trying to kind of understand. So it is a bit complex but compelling. Overall, I really did enjoy the book and started the second book later that night, which was yesterday. There aren't a lot of actual plot-driven events. The story as a whole isn't written in a way that makes the plot even the main point of the story. Majority of it is teaching about the world and the different communities, aka comms, and people, and this woman's journey through this apocalyptic land called the Stillness, and most specifically during the 5th season. But it's done in such a unique way, I honestly couldn't stop reading, even when it did seem a bit dull or confusing at times. It felt like the pilot episode of a series. It's not usually the most entertaining from start to finish, but you kind of understand that this purpose for majority of it is to set up this world for what's to come in the remainder of the series. I will say that the overall synopsis of the book is super misleading as far as the plot goes, because honestly this book did not follow the plot that it's presented as. Does it play a part in the story? Yes, it does, but I would not describe this to someone as a book where a woman is trying to find her daughter. Maybe it was presented that way intentionally in order to surprise the reader about what the real journey consists of, but I'm not sure. And maybe because this is one of those books where it's not meant to be centered around any specific plot point, which is the first for me. So it did take a bit getting used to, and which made me have to push myself through it a little. But I still believe it was done well, and I still believe it is a good read. So take that for what you will. I enjoyed it overall. I wouldn't say I was having the most thrilling time the entire time, but I do like, I don't know, this is my first time reading NK Jemisin, so it caught me off guard because I haven't read anything that was similar to the way she presents it, or presents the story or the information, so it was definitely unique. And although it took a minute for me to get used, I kind of like really enjoyed it. And now that I'm starting the second book, we're more into the journey of things, you know what I mean? So it's not so much of all this like super detailed, all this information kind of thrown at you at the beginning that you're kind of like catch up with. You kind of by this point understand what's going on in the world and the stillness, and with the origins and the stills and the guardians and fulcrum, and all of this sounds probably like it doesn't make any sense. You just haven't read it. If you have, you know what I'm talking about. You understand it more, to where I feel like I'm going to enjoy the second book more than the first book, hopefully. Because if I don't enjoy the second book that much, if I have to like trudge through it the way I did like the beginning of the first one, I'm not sure if I'll read the third one. But then again, it depends on how it ends, you know what I mean? Because sometimes the way a book ends, I just have to continue. So we'll see. But that's kind of just like my introduction of me a little bit, and my thoughts on the book, The Fifth Season by NK Jemisin. And yeah, we'll see how I feel about the second book, and then we'll see if I end up finishing the whole trilogy, and then I'll come on here and I'll talk to you guys about the trilogy. But that's it. I'm done with me yapping. Thank you for watching my video if you made it this far. I kind of yapped a lot and went on a tangent a little bit, but if you made it this far, I appreciate you for being here. I'm new on YouTube, so I'm still trying to figure this whole situation out. Like I said again, because of the whole TikTok situation. So we shall see. I'm going to try to make more YouTube videos and see if I can get a hang of this long form content situation. But until next time, bye.